we'll hurtle forward. Excellent. So, everything we've done so far is essentially a list of a whole collection of experiences that one could be mindful of, that would be valuable for practice to be mindful of, to know when they're happening. What we move into now is a list of very specific experiences that are associated with Dharma practice, very specific states of mind or kinds of experience that arise in the course of practice, and we begin to chart a pathway from kind of ordinary consciousness that's often caught up in grasping and aversion and delusion to a liberated consciousness or liberated being. So now we're talking very specifically about Dharma practice. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the hindrances. So when you're meditating, it's no walk in the park, and all sorts of things come up to make it difficult for you to steady the mind and be happy and comfortable. And these things can be generally boiled down into what's called the 5 hindrances. So these are now the next sphere to become mindful of. So while I'm practicing being mindful of all those other things, I will note when one of these 5 hindrances to clarity arises, and I'll be then mindful of that. Good.
Ganesh is in the shop. Is he in the shop?
Yeah, Ganesh is sitting on the screen. Okay, so I hope we didn't lose too much with the battery going out, but it is what it is. So Dhammas. We're on to the 4th foundation of mindfulness, just starting hindrances, and reading through this list of Dhammas, aspects of practice that are the steps on the path that are valuable to us in the path to be mindful as they arise. So, and how, monks, does he, in regard to Dhammas, abide contemplating Dhammas? Here, in regard to Dhammas, he abides contemplating Dhammas in terms of the 5 hindrances. And how does he, in regard to Dhammas, abide contemplating Dhammas in terms of the 5 hindrances?
If sensual desire is present in him, he knows there is sensual desire in me. If sensual desire is not present in him, he knows there is no sensual desire in me. And he knows how unarisen sensual desire can arise, and how arisen sensual desire can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed sensual desire can be prevented.
Okay, read the second paragraph.
If aversion is present in him, he knows there is aversion in me. If aversion is not present in him, he knows there is no aversion in me. And he knows how an aversion can arise, how aversion can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed aversion can be prevented.
Thank you.
If sloth and torpor is present in him, he knows there is sloth and torpor in me. If sloth and torpor is not present in him, he knows there is no sloth and torpor in me. And he knows how unrisen sloth and torpor can arise, how arisen sloth and torpor can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed sloth and torpor can be prevented.
If restlessness and worry is present in him, he knows there is restlessness and worry in me. If restlessness and worry is not present in him, he knows there is no restlessness and worry in me. And he knows how unarisen restlessness and worry can arise, how arisen restlessness and worry can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed restlessness and worry can be prevented.
If doubt is present in him, he knows there is doubt in me. If doubt is not present in him, he knows there is no doubt in me. And he knows how unarisen doubt can arise, how arisen doubt can be removed, and how a future arising of the removed doubt can be prevented. Read the refrain.
In this way, in regard to Dhammas, he abides contemplating Dhammas internally, externally and externally. He abides contemplating the nature of arising, of passing away, of both arising and passing away in Dhammas. Mindfulness that there are Dhammas is established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and continuous mindfulness, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how, in regard to Dhammas, he abides, contemplating Dhammas in terms of the 5 hindrances.
Super. This is one of the most important of the basic meditation training lists. It's taught on every retreat up at Spirit Rock and in other Theravadan centers. It's often the first of the lists given because, of course, you start experiencing them your first day of practice, so you might as well get on them right away. Just the hindrances in brief. Right? The first one, translated here as sensual desire, a more neutral translation often given now, simply grasping. And again, as we were talking about before, with lustful in the state of mind, contemplation, grasping onto any aspect of my experience. And a question that you can ask yourself that's valuable in practice, which means in daily life, which means all the time, is simply, am I wanting anything in this moment? Am I either wanting something that's happening to continue, or am I wanting something that's not happening? And so asking that and noticing that if in any way, do I want what's happening now to be different in any way from how it is? And that'll indicate whether there's a hindrance present. Right? So mindfulness, if there's sensual desire present, knowing there's sensual desire present. So I want something. My foot is a little cold. I want it to be a little bit warmer. So there's a sensual desire present in relation to that sensation. If sensual desire is not present, knowing that it's not present. Same as we did in the contemplation on mind. So knowing the presence or non-presence of that quality. And then there's these 3 stages that are really about cultivation. In the same way that we started with the breath, training the breath. You reflect on your experience. And this is interesting because this brings in a contemplation that brings in past and future. So often we say mindfulness is mindful of something that's happening in the present moment. But a reflection on how grasping arises is a reflection that's thinking about how things have gone. So it's actually reaching into the past. I'm remembering, grasping arose in me this way. It arose through this pathway. So if I take my slightly cold foot right now, I would notice that, first I was not actually aware of the temperature of my foot. And then at some point I became aware of a sensation. That sensation held an unpleasant Vedana, not even subtle, but a subtly unpleasant feeling tone. And rather than being mindful of that unpleasant feeling tone, so I did not, while we were sitting here, note to myself, my foot is cold and it's unpleasant. And but I didn't do that. I was doing other things, so I wasn't mindful of the foot in that moment. And so then there arose, kind of sneaky, right? Because if you're not mindful of a feeling tone, pleasant or unpleasant, it so easily spins over into grasping and aversion that we often don't notice it. So then a very subtle wishing it were otherwise arose in me. So there's this little aversion arose in me, or desire for it to be warmer. They're kind of 2 sides of the same coin. And so I might reflect, that's how it arose. I was not mindful of the sensation, which also meant I didn't do anything that might have, helped, like, put something on it to make it warmer.
But if you put something on it to make it warmer, then the desire is there to make it warmer.
Yeah.
You noted it.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, but it's
not a bad thing at all. There's no instruction to tolerate
But it says it's a hindrance. Desire is a hindrance. So if wanting to be warm,
right,
that's a desire. Why is that a hindrance?
It's a hindrance because your mind is not at ease. Being warm itself has nothing to do with it. being warm itself, like having the body be comfortable, is a conducive state to having the mind be at ease. So noting that something hurts, for instance, like oh, my knees start hurting, so I do what you've done, give the leg a little break. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no instruction to hang out, with an unpleasant thing just because there's a desire to fix it. But being mindful of the desire itself is a way of noting that a quality has arisen in the mind that has ruffled the water a little bit. In other words, if you think of it in relation to a mind that has the possibility of being completely calm and at ease, like an unruffled lake, with very few thoughts arising at all, and a very deep kind of spaciousness, then even the desire, I wish I were warmer, will be a ruffling of that mind stream a little bit. And so that's all it refers to as a hindrance. It's not that it's kind of a problem for my life in some way, or that I shouldn't keep my body, healthy, warm, comfortable. But just noting the presence of that thought in a way, or the presence of that leaning. That makes sense as a distinction? What do you think?
Well, hindrance has, it connotes something not good.
Yes. So this is, as a hindrance, sensual desire is really a contracted state of mind. It's a place where I've solidified in some way around a preference. So maybe it's useful then to distinguish that kind of solidification around a preference with just the noting, my foot is cold, and I could, and now I want to warm it up, but there's not maybe much charge there. Like, I'm actually fine, I'm not. It's not heavy. I think it still is a tiny ruffling of the lake, and in that sense, it's a hindrance if my goal is meditative calm. So remember that these are hindrances, not so much hindrances in like a bad thing in your life that you should never experience, but if your program is to incline the mind toward very deep states of stillness and clear seeing, then any arising of that preference is going to ruffle that. And then in terms of ordinary life, what I'm mostly attending to is sort of the strength of that thing. Like a little cold foot and the desire arising, mostly I'm like, fine, I put my thing on, right? No problem at all. But if I was on long retreat and I was meditating and I had set myself up in such a way that my temperature was going to get dysregulated, I was going to get cold, and that was going to arise in my consciousness and pull me away from, say, the breath, and I did the maneuver of picking up my sweater and putting on my foot, I've been in meditative states on retreat where that much movement and engagement with a thing would completely disrupt my process, right? It would bump me back up to the surface in a way, and I'd have to start sinking again, into stillness. So it's quite delicate when you're coming into meditative stillness sometimes that, you want to set up your situation as well as you can. And so like in the beginnings of a lot of the yogic texts and the beginning of this text, it says, put yourself in a conducive space first. So like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika says, make sure that you have, screens on your windows so that no bugs come in. Because if you're being bitten by mosquitoes, it's hard to concentrate. So in the same way, when I'm meditating, like often on retreat, before I sit down, I'll kind of sense the temperature and be like, am I going to get cold? Do I need a shawl? What's the most prepared I can be so that I don't have to think about physical comfort for the next hour, right? Make sense? Yeah.
Is it also sort of part of a larger practice though, so that when you recognize these really, like as you say, like a cold toe, it's not a hugely significant event in your life. It's unsettling to your practice at that moment, like to your sitting, your meditation practice. But is it kind of more of a larger practice too, that so like in your normal everyday life, you start to notice when that little subversive mind is starting to kind of dig away at you And you're not all of a sudden taken by surprise and then you can't deal with it.
Yeah.
Because you kind of just learn that, oh yeah, there's that little, that person's talking to me on the street again.
Yep.
I don't want to talk to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the things that I mostly note with this hindrance in daily life is the way that without mindfulness of grasping and aversion in relation to sense experience particularly, it's very easy to go from moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, just going for fixing an unpleasant sensation. And there's a teacher in Thailand who teaches exactly this way. She says, when you wake up in the morning, don't move, don't even open your eyes, don't do anything. Just wait and be mindful. And notice when you feel an urge to move. And you will notice that it's in relation to an unpleasant sensation having arisen, and you want to get out of that unpleasant sensation. She says, note that, and then do it. You know, maybe you have to open your eyes, but then keep them open. And just note what happens. And then pretty soon there will be an unpleasant sensation, and you'll have this urge to respond to it. And it goes on like that, you know. It's like, oh, I'm having an unpleasant sensation, so I go pee. Great. You know, now I've relieved that unpleasant sensation, but now there's the unpleasant sensation of standing in the cold bathroom on the cold tile with my pants down. So I try to relieve that unpleasant sensation by fixing all that up. And then I go out, and now what do? Now there's the unpleasant sensation of wondering what to do next. So I try to solve that by making a plan. And then there's the unpleasant sensation of hunger, so I solve it by eating. You know, but then there's the unpleasant sensation of dirty dishes, so I solve that by washing them. Then there's the unpleasant sensation of wet hands, so I solve it by drying them off. And you could take this on as a contemplation and note that you can basically run through your entire day playing a little bit of dodgeball with discomfort forever. And you're like, this could be, you know, existentially shocking, right? You're like, oh my God, this is what we're doing. Like, whew, right? So this contemplation can actually incline you toward noting that. Like, oh, how often am I actually content? And just stop fixing my situation in any way. And while you're meditating, of course, it's like in micro ways. Like, oh, there's a teensy way that my low back is working a little bit hard here, so I'm going to do this very, very slight shift in the spread of my sacrum and drop my weight. It's like, oh, and I fixed it. Now it's better. For like 3 seconds until something else happens. You know? And asana practice can feed this marvelously, because we can get very good at fixing our bodies in all sorts of ways. So, grasping an aversion, if aversion is present, right, the core question for aversion is there something that I would like to stop happening? You know, so I'm aversive to, you know, the war in Afghanistan, right? I'm also aversive to pain in my low back. I'm aversive to, you know, being cold. I'm aversive to being judged. I'm aversive to a million things, right? Anytime any of those are present, the mindfulness is be mindful of when it's here, be mindful of it when it's not here. And then again, the reflection, be mindful of how it arises. Here's the 3 categories, right? How unarisen aversion can arise, how arisen aversion can be removed. So while I'm having aversion, what are the antidotes that I can apply to it to get it to calm down? And how a future arising of the removed aversion can be prevented, which is a marvelously precise way of saying, you know, what can you do to train yourself so as to not get caught in that again? And that's true for all of them. Sloth and torpor is a wonderful Victorian way of saying getting sleepy or dull or foggy. It's my favorite hindrance, which is to say it's the one that I've struggled with the most over the years. I'm a long-term sleeper in meditation. Challenging. Restlessness and worry is the other. It's the flip side of that coin, right? The mind running. And basically the teachings say, the tradition says that the distracted mind is an aspect of restlessness and worry. So basically, if your mind is distracted and can't be brought to bear, it's essentially this 4th hindrance happening, restlessness in the mental sphere.
That's the
That's
hindrance that I hold hands with most often.
Indeed. There you go. Of course, we all do all of them at different times. And doubt, the most poetic and horrifying of them, doubt. So, They all come with similes that are quite marvelous. Which maybe I don't need to read you, but the core metaphor given in the texts is of a bowl of water. So if limpidity or reflectiveness of water is a metaphor that talks about why we're doing all of this, that we want to be able to see ourselves clearly, then it's said that sensual desire is similar to water mixed with dye. Aversion is like water heated to a boil. Sloth and torpor is like water overgrown with algae. Restlessness and worry is like the water stirred by wind, and doubt is like dark and muddy water. So, I know. There's another set of similes, and these are really fun also, illustrating the absence of them. To be set free from grasping is like being relieved from debt. To be set free from aversion is like recovering from illness. To be unobstructed by sloth and torpor is like being released from prison. To be free from the agitation of restlessness and worry is like being liberated from slavery. And to overcome doubt resembles crossing a dangerous desert safely. So you were lost, you didn't know how to get across, you found your way across. So, anything about these five before we close? In a certain way, these are, you could take like the 4 instructions on breath and then mindfulness of the hindrances and be on your way and go and practice for 10 years and come back and, let me know how it's going. Because in a way, they meet any of the other contemplations. This is what will get in the way of any of the other contemplations, is these 5 things. So you could sit down with the first breath contemplation, just knowing the breath going in and out, and track how the mind gets lost in restlessness and worry, or how the body becomes sleepy and the mind gets foggy, or how there's grasping onto certain things, even the breath, or even continuity of practice, or pushing away other things. Oh, the body hurts. Or doubt, am I doing this right? I'm not doing it right. Am I getting very far? I'm not getting very far. I can't do this. It's not a good practice for me. Oh, this is a terrible practice. It's a Hinayana practice. Whatever, doubt. So many ways of being doubtful. You could basically take your core meditation instructions and this, and they would take care of you. But the hindrances are what you need in order to be able to guide yourself on the path. That's why they're the first in this set of dhammas that we'll look at. Right? This is how you know you've either kind of fallen off center or off balance, or are cultivating states that aren't actually useful. So for instance, if I'm cultivating great concentration, but I'm grasping onto it like the blazes, at a certain point that's going to be very unuseful if I don't notice that there may be concentration present, but there's also substantial desire or grasping. Anything else about these?
I wonder if it's good to have a bit of doubt so that you don't end up being overconfident. So that, I don't know, maybe overconfidence would fit into another category, but
right.
Just to balance it as you go forward, because that seems like another hindrance.
Right. In Zen, they say, always cultivate the great doubt. Right. And in that sense, the doubt is like, don't ever think like you got it. Like keep questioning. Like, what is it really? What is it really? Great doubt. Why are we here? Like, what's true? What's true? Go deeper. That's a great doubt. That's a kind of inquiry doubt. Doubt here really refers to doubt as a hindrance, where an idea about how it's going is getting in the way. So in a sense, we could call those things different things. Doubt, in a way, it could almost be like a wise, sort of like maturity in practice, a kind of skepticism. But it's not like you're doubting yourself. Which is to say, if you're having thoughts of great pride and confidence, you might note that they're colored by a degree of grasping. So actually there's a presence of a different hindrance that you're not being mindful of in relation to those. So noting that with mindfulness will tend to mean there's not a kind of doubt, because you're clear seeing in relation to what's happening. Oh, I got all confident because things were going well. But actually that was confidence. And noting a state like pride is very valuable. Right? Oh, pride is like this. Right.
The doubt is kind of in this sense. To me, I think of it as just kind of like it's almost a form of aversion. It's almost like a way of kind of getting out of it. You're trying to, you're looking. So it's like the difference really between inquiry and doubt. Like what they don't mean in inquiry here. Because the Buddha, I think he said himself, like, don't take my word for it. Do it. And
you
see,
have to
and
inquire.
Yeah.
Right.
But doubting is kind of that thing that you do when you really don't want to do something anyway. So you're kind of looking for a reason not to do it. Well, at least that's what I do. Anyway.
Right. So then doubt and aversion are really like married together.
They seem to be kind of,
Yeah. And in practice up at Spirit Rock, sometimes people will use the term, I'm having a multiple hindrance attack. like I'm actually simultaneously like grasping onto doing it better, totally afraid of how it's actually going, falling asleep, completely distracted, and thinking I'm doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right, actually.
Right? Like, okay, been there.
Pretty much
all five.
Sounds like my whole day.
Right? So it can be nice to parse them out and be like, okay, here's the thinking I'm doing it wrong. Thank you very much. That's doubt. Here's the way that I'm just like thinking all crazy. That's restlessness. Here's the way that I'm actually kind of foggy, like, so that's sloth and torpor. I don't really have the energy to apply to what I'm doing. So yeah, multiple hindrance attack. Just note when it happens and, get up from the cushion, go for a run, like change it up.
It's nice to have little slots to put them in, because then you can kind of just say, okay, this is this. Now I'm just going to put it there for now, and then just kind of get on with it.
Absolutely.
We can either flush it or talk about it later. Yeah.
Or actually, even once you name it, remember Rumpelstiltskin, once you name it, it loses a lot of its power. Yeah. So doubt is sticky because it totally runs the show. Mm-hmm. When I'm doubting, I'm not being mindful of doubt. I'm just like, I'm just doing it wrong. I'm like, it's emotional, right? As soon as I notice, oh, this is doubt, I'm just being attacked by doubt. Like,
it's a really good thing.
It all changes just in that moment. Like, it's almost like the antidote to doubt is just seeing that it's doubt, right? As soon as you say, your name is Rumpelstiltskin, he just tears himself apart, right? Now, often he comes right back, right? Because doubt is very strong, and it's often quite rooted in us. But in the Buddhist texts, there's a supernatural being called Mara, who's seen as kind of the embodiment. He's like the mythical embodiment of the hindrances, and especially of doubt. And he shows up to the Buddha and says things like, and long after he's enlightened, Mara keeps showing up. So you will still have thoughts of doubt of yourself after you're enlightened. You'll just be mindful of them right away, and they won't really get you. Mara shows up and is like, what are you doing? Do you think you can really do that? Like, you're not going to make it, And the Buddha's response is mindfulness. The Buddha says, I see you, Mara. That's all. I see you. So Mara kind of comes in the shadows and goes like, look what you're doing. What do you think about that?
That's great.
And Mara's like, I see you. And one of the great translations of that is it says, Mara says, oh, the Blessed One has seen me, and slinks away. Right? They can't, doubt particularly, can't stand being seen. And we should end. But one retreat, I 6 days into the retreat, I came in feeling all gung-ho, and 5 days in, it was just a wreck, right? I was doing terribly, not getting anywhere, all those things. I had decided that I was a total failure as a meditator, and that it was just it was all for shit. And the fact that I had started teaching was just complete baloney. I had nothing to teach. This is ridiculous. I should just put my hoodie over my head and go running out of the center right now. I shouldn't even show my face to the teachers. I was such a crying shame. And I got caught in this for 3 days. And, and eventually I was talking to my teachers, and I was kind of complaining about things. I was like, I'm doing this, all this. And he said, got a lot of doubt going on, don't you? And I was like, it was almost like, no! Because it's like, oh, it totally got me. That's all it was. It's like, fuck, it's doubt. It's not because I thought I was so right. I was like, and it's like, and my teacher told me this, and this is not happening, and I'm just like, ugh. And it's like a lot of doubt, huh? And I was like, oh no, that's all it is. And it was almost heartbreaking. I almost was just like, I'm going to cry, I'm going to cry because I was so wrong, in a way. Like, I hate being wrong. I was really wrong. I thought I was all right about how everything was going, and actually I was just having the hindrance of doubt. And once we named it, it was gone. I was like, oh, that's doubt. And I just walked out of the interview room, and it was like, okay, mindful of doubt. I guess we'll go back and meditate some more. And it just went away. Like all of those stories that were so real, just, right. And in that case, it wasn't my power as a meditator that was like, I see you, Mara. That's why we go to our teachers. And the teacher's like, nice to see you, and nice to see your friend Mara. Good to see you both here. And you're like, oh, what are you doing here? And,